Back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad to take your phone calls and emails. Do you realize we're just about at the moment where it will have been exactly 12 months since the China virus first arrived on the shores in the United States? And, of course, an awful lot of the schools, they took their time in shutting down and sending the kids home because at the time we didn't know much about the disease. Now there's a vaccine, there's much better medical treatment, and they at least have figured out a number of the things that we didn't know at all at this point or even a month from this point a year ago. I thought we'd talk with Jonathan Butcher, who serves as a senior policy analyst at the Center for Education Policy at Heritage. Jonathan, welcome back to the program. And I guess the question comes down to the way I framed it is, should schools that can reopen safely do so despite objections from their teachers?
Well, with the best evidence we have, we know that schools are not super spreaders. They have not been the source of significant increases in positive tests for teachers or for students. So I think the best thing that schools can do right now is at least give parents the option to have their students go back in person.
And what should happen, because this is where push comes to shove? You know, my boss expects me to be at work every single day. And if I don't go to work, then I don't draw a paycheck. And I would imagine that applies to virtually everyone who is listening to this program. You can't just tell the boss, well, I don't want to go back to work. If you say that, the boss will say, then I don't have to employ you. Except that a lot of the school districts, I think, feel held hostage by the teachers as though they have to figure out how can we talk them into going back to work. Should that be the relationship? Because the parents and the non-parent taxpayers out there have already paid for the education that wasn't delivered for most of last year. So should this be a case where the school district has to negotiate the return of these teachers?
Well, the biggest issue is with teacher unions, especially in places like Chicago. What you have is unions setting themselves up in opposition to parents. What unions are doing is they are flexing their political muscle. They are advocating for issues that don't have anything to do with learning in some cases. Especially in Chicago, even now they are earning or they are getting from the legislature the ability to negotiate over things that they didn't have before, getting even more power about keeping schools closed. This is a big concern in a metro area like Chicago.
Well, and I guess, look, I'm fully in favor of public education, all right? I'm not enough of a libertarian to just say, well, hey, educate your kid if you want to, but we're not going to provide a system. I think it's to the benefit of this country to have an educated population, at least educated K through 12. But when I see headlines like this one from just a short time ago, Chicago is reopening schools against fierce resistance from the teachers. Well, you know, in any other employment situation, you'd say, if you don't want to come back to work, we'll replace you. Except, as you point out, the unions are a big part of that, and they see an opportunity, as Rahm Emanuel of Chicago often said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And they say, why, we can use this to obtain additional benefits for our members, maybe to get a little more political hay made out of it, to say, there were some things we want to change in curriculum or in union work rules or paychecks or benefits of other kinds. And now they're having to fight to get the teachers back. I would hope that taxpayers would look at that and say, listen, I don't want to put my kids into a system where the people who work in the system, who are always proud to tell you why I educate kids, it's one of the most important things we do. I agree with that notion. Being one of the most important things we do, though, does not give you the ability to then hold the kids hostage so that you can obtain as much, political gain or salary gain as possible.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think that what we see, though, is that these headlines make it sound like lots of kids are going back to school in person in Chicago, for example, when really what's going on is only a couple of thousand pre-K students and children with special needs. These were the first kids to return. The next group of elementary and middle school kids, they won't be going back till February or later. High school kids, they're still out indefinitely from in-person learning. So I think that the students who are looking to launch themselves either into the college world or into the workplace, these are the kids that are particularly at risk right now because they may not have been in a classroom since March. So I think, this idea that suddenly we are easing kids back in some of these large metro areas, it's still not happening. And again, it goes back to what the unions are doing, even though millions upon millions have been set aside by these areas to, buy masks and do various, types of cleaning services to keep, make the classroom safe for kids to get back to.
I'm talking to Jonathan Butcher, who's at the Heritage Foundation at the Center for Education Policy. For example, one of the things that was a bit of surprise about what's being reported on this tonight in Chicago, and I don't think it's dramatically different in other school districts. It may be a little more or a little less depending on the power of unions, and which I think pretty much depends on whether you're in a blue state or a red state. But the gal who is the chief executive of the school system, Janice Jackson, they've got a school system with 1/3 kids in it, and she said, we want the teachers to go back to work on Monday. And if you don't, you stay home, you ain't getting paid. That actually warms the cockles of my heart, Jonathan, because that's the kind of language I would like to hear from public administrators everywhere. Not to be mean to teachers or anything like that, but to say, look, we've made it possible for you to go back to work. Go back to work. If you decide not to, don't expect a paycheck. The last place I would have guessed that would come was in the city of Chicago.
Well, and I think that shows the changing of the times. I mean, I think that shows what the pandemic has done with the perspective of policymakers and parents when it comes to this issue of the political power of teacher unions. I think that we've seen increasing percentages of kids earning D's and F's, especially in large areas around the country. We have thousands of kids who can't be accounted for, simply haven't been reached in some of these large metro areas. And I think that's changing the perspective, and rightfully so, that students are being left out, that this has become an exercise in protecting a system, especially by the vested interests of power. So, I would look forward to states, especially in the coming couple of years with the incoming administration in Washington. I think it's now going to be up to state public officials, right? It's going to be up to state policymakers to be ready to stand up to these to teacher unions and be looking out for students, right? To create the type of learning environment where parents have the choices that they need to make in their child's best interest.
Jonathan, one other question, and it goes a little astray from the things we've been talking about, but I always suspected, because I've really advocated for online education. I don't have a financial interest in it, and I don't have any. My kids are both adults now, but I've always thought it is a good fit for some kids. Probably not the majority, but probably a large percentage of them. And a lot of parents have been forced to do that, to put their kids into online education. And for some of them, it's worked very, very well. Others, it doesn't. But does this mean that going forward, a lot of those parents who figured out online education fits our family very nicely, and we want to keep our kids in it, that the public schools, the conventional, bricks and mortar schools, are going to lose them forever? And maybe to the benefit of both the students and the taxpayers. Give me your take on that, since you write policy on this stuff.
Well, I think you're exactly right. That's the lesson here from the pandemic, that if you give families only one choice, you're going to find that there are thousands, if not millions, of students who are not going to fit the single choice that they are given in an assigned system. So you're right. Online learning does work for some children. It may not work for all. It's not going to work for everyone. And so that's why, right, we need the different options, from charter schools to open enrollment to private school scholarships on down, for students in different situations. It's in places like Chicago and LA where we're really struggling with this issue up to the pandemic, because the unions there capped the growth of these choices. They've limited the number of charter schools that can open in Chicago. That's all due to what the unions have leveraged over the past several years. So, the pandemic's brought us to this place where parents can see, right, what it means when you force everyone into the same option.
Yeah, and you know what, Jonathan? I know we won't know for sure for probably 20 years, but won't it be interesting to find out 20 years from now what percentage of the kids that went to online education and for whom it fit end up doing a whole lot better educationally, which is what I suspect is going to happen, and how many kids who went back to the traditional old school model ended up not getting as good an education and not doing as well long term. That's Jonathan Butcher from the Heritage Foundation. Coming